Welcome back, everybody, to the First Contact Summer Series. And today we're going to talk about some of the first contact locations or locations within the US that I feel are going to be very impacted by the astrology that we have going this summer. So, I did do a series last year. I did the birth charts of every state in the US, and I wrote some articles about each of those states and the blueprints that they had. And so I'll probably put that all into kind of like a giant booklet, just because I also find it interesting that a lot of people this summer and I think this year are going to be called to different locations, right? Because when we're talking about first contact, of course, with the future self, that's what we're focusing on. But of course, there's lots of things going on in terms of like the UFO files being dropped, right? I think there has been three drops so far, and it's becoming more common, right? The month of decloaking that we're in, it's becoming a lot more common for people to share their stories, post their photos and videos, right, of seeing what we would call paranormal activity. And I think, again, that this goes hand in hand, right? The more that we are actually decloaking our true selves, we are bringing our authentic inner self out into the world, that is manifesting as actual decloakings, right? And again, it's the veil dropping, right? And that's what we talked about with June's energy. It is the dropping of the veil, the decloaking, if you will, where we're simply able to perceive more and see more than we could before, right? And July, which I just did, July's first contact video, which was about actual first contact with the future. And I do think that will lead to, again, more experiences of first contact with basically when we're talking about the future, it's really just a dimensional state, right? It is a dimensional state that is further along in the timeline. And so we're going to start to get that bleed through. So looking at the locations though, there are certain locations that might have more activity than others. I think that's due to we don't know a lot of the ancient origins of our lands, right? All we have to go on is like history. And so all the different states, right? Once they have their blueprint, we have ancient origins of these lands. There is different energies for each of these. And so a lot of you might be called to certain locations, and there might be more activity, if you will, more paranormal or just different types of activations, different types of blueprints that emerge through all of these. So one of the first prime locations, and this is just my feeling, this is my theory, right? I think prime locations for transformation activations, first contact energy, one of them is going to be the 13 colonies, right? So what's interesting about the 13 colonies is they all share very, very similar blueprints, and that's because they were all established within the same couple of years. So obviously it started in 1787 up until 1790. Those were when the 13 original colonies were established. So they all actually have very similar archetypes and very similar blueprints with slight differences, right? But I think because these are the oldest states in our country, right? They are going to have deep transformation because of this, right? They're carrying the most conditioning. They're carrying the most history. And so one of the things you'll notice about the 13 colonies is that they all have Pluto in Aquarius, right? So we've talked about the Pluto return for the United States as a whole, right? And technically, right, the Declaration of Independence, when that was signed, we celebrate July 4th, 1776. Technically, Pluto was at the 27th degree of Capricorn at that time. So that is why when we refer to the US's chart and we refer to the Pluto return of the United States, we reference Pluto in Capricorn. So technically the United States already went through its Pluto return. However, there's caveats to this, right? And one of the caveats is we can definitely see like the reckoning that had started for the United States throughout the Pluto and Capricorn era that began in 2008. We started off hot with the market crash of 2008, which I don't think we ever really recovered from. And this led into the 2010s where lots of things happened, including like Trump's first term, right, in 2016, the WikiLeaks drops of 2015 and 2016, which kind of blew wide open a lot of the secrets and a lot of the corruption that was going on in the government. We had the Pizzagate files, right? And of course, this continued on through the pandemic of 2020, where we had Saturn and Pluto, the two big malefics conjunct in Capricorn, which happened right before the lockdowns. And so this went on, right, until about 2024 when Pluto officially moved into Aquarius. But the caveat here is that this year, actually, we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the US. And the 250-year mark is very key. That is typically in line with a Pluto return. That is typically when you see empires and regimes fall. Either they fall, they crumble, or they transform into something else. And that's where we're at right now. We'll talk about the July 4th chart soon because it's very interesting. But again, the caveat here is also that the Constitution was written under Pluto in Aquarius. The 13 colonies were established under Pluto in Aquarius. So even though we've technically, as a whole, gone through our Pluto return, it's really not over yet, right? And again, we're already seeing things where there has been a lot of conversation about how we are basically in conflict with the Constitution. We are not following the Constitution. There's going to be a lot more, I think, conversations and discussions about either redoing the Constitution or what the Constitution means to us. That's going to become a hot topic. Now, the 13 colonies, they all share Pluto in Aquarius. So I think that's interesting to note. So they are all going through their Pluto returns, right? And Pluto in Aquarius is trying to basically bring us all back into the understanding of what it means to have community. What it means, what is progress, right? Is progress good for the whole, or is it damaging to the whole? There's a lot of topics around crimes against humanity. There's a lot of topics about the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology, right? There's also this level of like needing to live authentically and needing to allow people the freedom to be authentic, to be who they are. And I think the 13 colonies are really going to take this on. And actually I would even include Washington, D.C. as the 14th colony, because technically Washington, D.C. was also established during the time of the 13 colonies. And of course, Washington, D.C. is its own country. Fun fact. It actually lies completely outside the jurisdiction of the U.S. kind of. It's its own entity. And so they also have Pluto in Aquarius. Now, all of the 13 colonies as well, well, not, let's see, maybe not, I think all of them, let's see. So all of them except 2 have their north node in Sagittarius. So the last couple of colonies, North Carolina and Rhode Island, They actually, and Washington, D.C., they actually have the North Node in Scorpio. Because the nodes turned towards the end of 1789. And so they actually carry a North Node Scorpio. So the Chiron and Taurus transit we're about to enter, Chiron's going to be opposing their North nodes. So North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. are going to have a Chiron opposition to their North node. But the rest of the colonies do have their North nodes in Sagittarius. And all of the colonies, including Washington, D.C., have their Chiron in Gemini. And so what is this going to look like, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Washington, D.C. actually has its Chiron in Cancer. That's the one outlier because they were founded in 1790, right at the end of this original establishment, right? So what's interesting here is Uranus in Gemini is opposing all the North Node and Sagittariuses. So there's a conflict of information here. There is a questioning of beliefs. There is a questioning of what people believe in, of what their guiding kind of principles are. Uranus and Gemini is going to be opposing the North nodes here. So it's going to be kind of conjuncting all of their South nodes, which is saying like, what information are you going off of? Right? And the questioning of information and the questioning of what we believe. And because they all have Chiron and Gemini, besides Washington, D.C., Uranus is hitting on their Chirons as well, right? This wound around feeling like they don't have all the facts, wounds around communication, wounds around understanding and having language and expression to like what the collectives are feeling. So I think that that's very interesting, okay? And so all of those are going to have somewhat of a shakeup here. And now Washington, D.C. also has Saturn and Aries, so they are also in their Saturn return and their Pluto return, okay? So you know, we'll just take that for what it's worth. I think the Saturn return is putting a lot of pressure on Washington, D.C. right now, and that is necessary, and that is going to continue for the next couple of years. So after the 13 colonies, one of the grid activations that we did last year, so for those of you who have joined in the New Earth activations, we started those, I believe, last summer. And we were going through all these locations. And of course, we were doing grid activations for all of the US states and to activate the divine blueprints of these lands, right? To basically help everybody, all the collectives, wherever you live, there's a reason you live there. You're drawn to the energy. You have to work with the energy of that land. And so it was to activate the energy of these lands so that all of the collectives, especially the United States collective, can receive the proper codes, the proper energy, the proper activations. And so we did a lot of different grid works within all the states. And one of the grid activations that we did was for first contact locations. And so one of my theories is looking, as I was looking at all of the charts here of the states, it did become clear to me that the states that had Mercury in Aquarius, right? Because Mercury is our communication, right? Mercury is the transmitter of codes, of information, and it works both ways, right? Mercury is how we receive information, how we receive intel, right? Downloads, it's how we learn, it's how we process information, and then it's also how we communicate and how we send information out. So Mercury, right? And the symbol for Mercury is interesting if you are familiar with astrology. The symbol for Mercury, it has two little antennas on the top. And that is very mercurial, if you will. It's an antenna. It's how we're transmitting and receiving at all times, right? And how the signal is interpreted, if you will. So it became clear to me as I was looking at all of the blueprints of the states that those that had Mercury in Aquarius seem to be the locations where the most kind of galactic or paranormal or just out of the ordinary things occur, right? And so going through that list of states here, one of those states is Massachusetts. And if you guys remember recently, there was all these reports of sonic booms happening. And it was in a few states. South Carolina was also one of them. But yeah, the sonic boom, I believe, happened right outside of Boston. And Massachusetts, has a lot of lore. There's a lot of lore, like Salem, Massachusetts. We'll also get to Oregon as well, Salem, Oregon. And Massachusetts was, one of the places where a lot of the witch trials occurred. It's got a lot of myth around it. And so it actually has a very interesting blueprint. And so for that reason, I do feel that Massachusetts is going to be one of those locations where there is a lot of otherworldly activity, if you will. Okay, so that was the first one. Now, Massachusetts also happens to have its Sun in Aquarius and Mercury in Aquarius and Pluto in Aquarius and Saturn in Aquarius. So Massachusetts is an Aquarius stellium state, okay? And we have to acknowledge that. Like, if you live in Massachusetts, if you're called to visit there, this is an area where there is going to be a lot of change, okay? Especially with Pluto's presence there. The nodes are going to change into the North Node in Aquarius. So this is going to activate a lot of these states that have very Aquarian energy. This calls for change, innovation. It also is going to, nonetheless, bring paranormal activity, okay? So Massachusetts is one of my main states that I feel is going to have a lot to it. Now, let me see what was next on my list of Mercury in Aquarius. We have Vermont. Vermont is another one that's very interesting. Vermont, actually, fun fact, is where the Theosophy Society by Madame Blavatsky was founded. That is where the lodge was. So there's a lot of esoteric energy in Vermont, okay? And Vermont has its Mercury in Aquarius, and then it has its Pluto in Aquarius, and it is a Pisces stellium. Sun, Moon, Venus, Mars, all in Pisces. And it also has Saturn in Aquarius. So it's very ethereal, okay? So Vermont's another one that I have felt really strongly about paranormal, galactic, interdimensional activity there. And the next one is Ohio. And Ohio, again, lots of stuff is always coming out of Ohio. They have like ancient mounds there. These like sacred mounds that they have theories about who built them and how they occurred. But Ohio's kind of this random place that you don't really expect, but it's got the signature, okay? It's got Mercury in Aquarius. And Ohio also has a Pisces stellium, Sun in Pisces, Pluto in Pisces, and the North Node in Pisces. So Ohio's currently in its North Node return. It is a very spiritual location. Okay, now also Ohio has its moon in Gemini and Mars in Gemini. So that is being activated by Uranus. There is going to be new information. There's going to be technology bursts. There's going to be possibly some chaotic activity. But again, Ohio is one of those places to keep an eye on. Now, the next location that has Mercury in Aquarius is Michigan. Okay, Michigan's another place, right? You've got the Great Lakes where there's a lot of myth, lore, and legends about things that have happened at the Great Lakes. There's also been lots of UFO sightings in Michigan. I personally know multiple people who live in Michigan or have lived in Michigan and have experienced a lot of paranormal activity, ship sightings, UFO contact, a lot of abductions as well came out of Michigan. So that's just another interesting area. So Michigan Also has an Aquarius stellium, Sun in Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius, and Neptune in Aquarius. Neptune in Aquarius is another one to keep an eye on. That's very much like the consciousness is aligned to things that are out of bounds, to things that are otherworldly. Okay, now Michigan also has Jupiter in Leo, so they will be having their Jupiter return. You might see more spotlight on Michigan, more information coming out of Michigan. Okay. They also happen to have Pluto in Aries. Very interesting. So we currently have Saturn and Neptune in Aries, Chiron at the tail end. So Pluto in Aries, there's some deep transformation going on there. And there could be a lot activated here, and that might create an energy where the collective there has to transform a lot of anger, rage, conflict, divisiveness. And so that also might be part of it. But with intergalactic activity, that could actually bring everybody together. So keep an eye on Michigan. The next one, of course, is Florida. My home state, born and raised there. Everybody who lives there, and if you've ever been to Florida, knows there is something very special about Florida. Also, you know, it's right there against the Bermuda Triangle. Like, I think there's a lot of Atlantis lore that bleeds into Florida. Florida is a wild place, okay? That's why you see every headline that begins with Florida man, ... Like, it's a very wild place, okay? But there has also been a ton of galactic activity there. So especially on the West Coast, like Clearwater, the Big Bend there on the Gulf of Florida, there's a lot. Like, Clearwater is a Stargate. We did that activation last month. So Clearwater, I believe, is part of Stargate 2. Sarasota, Florida is part of Stargate 2. But Clearwater is also another location that has a lot of activity. You'll see a lot of videos of like orbs and things like that coming out of Florida. Now, Florida also has an Aquarius stellium. Okay, so that kind of adds up, right? So kind of similar to Massachusetts, actually. Heavy Aquarius stellium. So they've got Mercury in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, Neptune in Aquarius. This is a very intergalactic place, okay? It also has the North Node in Scorpio. So, and Pluto in Aries as well. So it's intense, right? But Florida, I believe there was also a sonic boom heard off the coast there. So Florida is going to be one of those places, absolutely, that is going to get galactic activity. And there might be some more paranormal things that come out of there. The next one is Oregon. Oregon is one of it's on my radar. I've been thinking a lot about Oregon. Something special is going to happen with Oregon. I don't know what it is, but I've personally just been getting a lot of downloads about Oregon. And my vision is gravitating towards Oregon. So if you live there, if you've been there, I think there's something really special there. I feel there's going to be something big, something very out of this world that occurs in Oregon. I don't know what it is, but it's just my gut feeling. Now, Oregon is kind of special. It was founded on Valentine's Day. So it's got kind of this very like lovers, vibe to it. And it also has a lot of Aquarius energy. So we've got the Sun in Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius, and the North Node in Aquarius. So Oregon's going to be going through its nodal return. Okay. And I think that kind of adds to this here. It also has Chiron in Aquarius. So maybe there's a wound here around opening up to the otherworldly, accepting itself as you are meant to be an outlier. You are a little bit weird and quirky, right? It also has Jupiter in Gemini. And so Uranus is going to be activating this Jupiter in Gemini, which to me signals new headlines, new information coming out. But yeah, if you're in Oregon, I think it's a very unique location. Let me know if you've had any interesting activity there. The next one is Kansas. We don't really talk a lot about Kansas, but Kansas really blew my mind actually when I looked at its birth chart. This is all, this is where Mom was born as well. For those of you know her story. So she was born in Kansas, and Kansas is one of those places like we make jokes about of like who goes to Kansas, right? But think about the Wizard of Oz, right? That has a lot of comes out of Kansas. Mercury in Aquarius, Sun in Aquarius. Okay, so also Chiron in Aquarius there. Jupiter in Leo. Kansas is going to enter its Jupiter return, so we love that for Kansas. It also has Uranus in Gemini. So it's in its Uranus return as well. Okay, it also has Neptune in Pisces. So already went through its Neptune return, but there is some spiritual energy here. There is something, I think, undiscovered and unseen here about Kansas. It is also a one state. Okay, so it has a numerology 1 signature. This is a 1 year. So keep your eyes on Kansas. I think, the Wizard of Oz thing really comes to me here. But I think there is something very unique, very special about Kansas, and we're sleeping on Kansas. It's a little overlooked, but it is one of my prime locations that I'm keeping an eye on. And the last one with Mercury in Aquarius is Arizona. Okay, so Arizona, let me find you here. Arizona, also similar to Oregon, was established on Valentine's Day. I think that's weird. I don't know. It stands out to me, if you will. They also have, and of course, Arizona is known for Sedona. It's got a giant vortex there. There is something extremely magical about Arizona. It's got a lot of ley lines, vortexes. And so, of course, they also have Mercury in Aquarius and the Sun in Aquarius, and they have Uranus in Aquarius. So this gives me the vortex vibes for sure. They also have Pluto in Gemini. I think that's really interesting. Pluto and Mars in Gemini. So there is lots to uncover here. There is hidden information. There is interesting lore, I think, to emerge from Arizona, more than what we already know here. But they also have Saturn in Taurus. So when Chiron enters Taurus, it's going to interact with this Saturn here at some point. So there could be some healing to do with the land here. There could be maybe some abundance activations here that need to be done. But Arizona, it's got an interesting signature. So those are my prime locations right now for just any type of maybe galactic paranormal contact activity are the Mercury and Aquarius location. So those are really my focus points here. Like I said, all of the states that have Pluto in Aquarius, you are in your Pluto return. So there's inevitably going to be deep transformation, changes, evolution here in your collectives and maybe in the governments of these states. And so I'll just read you off quickly the list of Pluto and Aquarius states. So if you're living in one of these states, you know that your collective is in its Pluto return. Okay, so that is Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, Rhode Island, Vermont, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Washington, D.C. And of course, there was only one state that had its North Node in Aquarius, and that is Oregon. That's another reason why my eye is on Oregon. It's the only state that has its North Node in Aquarius. So, time to shine, Oregon. And the final state that, of course, I have my eye on is Colorado. And that is because Colorado is the only state that has Chiron in Taurus. So we are the only state, 'cause I'm currently in Colorado, that will be in its Chiron return during Chiron in Taurus. I also find that weird. I also find that interesting. So for those of you who are also in Colorado, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the blueprint of Colorado. So we are the only state that has Chiron in Taurus. We don't have any Aquarius energy. Go figure. Even though I think there's a lot of weird shit that goes on in Colorado, especially in the parts that, you know, I live in. There's intense UFO activity, lots of myth, lore, and legend about the valley. But we have no Aquarius energy. And that's always interesting to me. So Colorado has a lot of Leo energy. So Sun in Leo, Mercury in Leo, Mars in Leo, Uranus in Leo. Now, that's interesting because Leo is the sister sign of Aquarius. So maybe there's a connection there. We don't necessarily have a lot of Aquarian energy, but we sure as fuck have a lot of Leo energy. And so when Jupiter enters Leo at the end of this month, this is going to ignite this Leo stellium here. The South Node will also be in Leo. So there's going to be this, I don't know, there's a big light energy, a big kind of light boom of Leo energy that's going to emerge out of Colorado. We also have Jupiter in Scorpio. There's this expansion of esotericness, of things that are hidden, things that are below the depths here. We also have, along with Chiron in Taurus, Neptune in Taurus, and Pluto in Taurus. I don't know about that, but you know, there could be a lot of abundance that gets activated in Colorado. I also think of the elementals. I think, especially with Neptune in Taurus here, I think of the magic of elementals, because I'm not sure if any other states have Neptune in Taurus, actually. I think we're the only state that has Neptune in Taurus. Isn't that bizarre? Just doing a quick run through here. I think we're the only state that has Neptune in Taurus. That is weird. That is so weird. I actually didn't notice that before. Okay, we're an outlier. There's something weird going on. Anyway, Neptune in Taurus. We're the only state that has Neptune in Taurus. So the magic of the land here, the consciousness, the elementals, it's giving me that kind of vibe, like something might, and remember, Neptune is beyond the veil, so something might emerge from the land itself, right? Taurus is the earth, nature. A lot of magic in the elemental realms here. There could be a lot of abundance there, but also with Pluto in Taurus, we're going to have to be very realistic. We're already going through some extreme droughts, wildfires. So there is transformation happening physically through the land here. And I think that's going to really come through with Pluto and Taurus, especially when Chiron enters here. So fun fact is also Colorado is the only numerology 4 state. We are the only numerology 4 state. 4 is Cancer, the mother, home, the foundation. I also find that interesting. Now, the only other location that has a numerology 4 is Washington, D.C. And I remember, if you remember, there was a point where they were like talking about changing the capital to Colorado. Like, there's an interesting connection there, but yeah, these are the prime locations that I am certainly keeping an eye on. And again, it doesn't mean that no other location is gonna, that not all locations are going to have paranormal activity or galactic activity or activations, but these are locations that seem to have a very unique energy signature. So keep your eyes on those. And if you're in any of these locations, let me know if you've had any strange experiences, if you are sensing anything happening, but we can probably expect some news to be coming out of any one of these locations moving forward. So love you guys, and I'll be back soon with our next First Contact Summer Series.